So today, we are going to dive into one of the first apostles seen in the series, and I dare say the first main antagonist of Berserk. Most of the opening short but sweet Black Swordsman arc revolved around the Slug count and how his existence and Guts' battle with him showcases many of the ideas and lore that would continue throughout the entire rest of Berserk up until this very day. Black Swordsman arc takes place during a time in Guts' life where he was simply wandering the earth, searching for apostles in order to kill them for vengeance against the fallen Band of the Hawk, and to hopefully lead him back to Griffith and the God Hand. The Slug count, or just the Count, was first introduced in Chapter 0C, which would technically be the third chapter of the manga, called Guardians of Desire Part 1. He's seen on top of a lookout overseeing the execution of a heretic as he sits on a pretty elaborate looking throne. Many people would assume, due to his appearance and presentation, that he is a king of some sort. But that's what's great about the Berserk manga and its world building, is that even though at this point Miura could have made this character a king, it wouldn't have contradicted anything that was going on back then, he still chose not to, opting to save his king character for a little bit later on in the story. And the Count is just that, a count.
But sometimes I get carried away.
A count is a title of nobility, and they would serve as someone who managed provinces or areas on behalf of a king. Obviously, a king couldn't be everywhere at once, so it makes sense that they would have somebody keeping a ruling eye in areas that they were farther away from. It might be safe to assume he was a count for the Midland King, as the story doesn't venture too far away from his territory overall, but given the fact that Guts was traveling for a span of 2 years, he could have crossed into another kingdom or territory. The thing about this character is, he is not given a proper name. We only know him as the Count, or the Slug Count, or that big slimy boy, as I like to call him. I also like how we are introduced to him overseeing the execution of a heretic specifically. Again, Berserk was very early on in its development here, that it seems like it wouldn't matter, but it actually helps so much with the world building as Berserk's story later expands to incorporate the Holy See religion, and the strong hold that they have over the world, and the execution and burning of heretics. The Count is, of course, an apostle, and the very first whose backstory we see, and is fleshed out as a character that we understand despite not maybe agreeing with the way that he eats people alive. But before he was an apostle, Slug Boy was a human, and probably performed his countly duties with proper dignity and integrity, as well as being a wholesome family man. Well, one day, after a long hard day of heretic hunting, all a man wants to do is come home to his loving wife who appreciates him for who he is. Instead, he walked into the biggest satanic orgy this side of Albion, and with his wife straddling the idol of a goat in the midst of it all. Specifically, this goat symbol is a Baphomet, an iconic symbol whose origins come from medieval times and was worshipped by the Knights of Templar, found out because they were tortured and interrogated by the Inquisition at the time, who admitted that they were worshipping this pagan idol called Baphomet, and it's often associated with satanic rituals and sexuality. But instead of joining into the festivities, the Count just decided to murder all the heretics there in a blinding rage, until all that was left was his wife, who admittedly is pretty thick, but he couldn't bring himself to kill her, and she knew this, and she smiled about it. And seeing that smile, it overtook him, that the power she had over him was so strong. This set him into the brink of despair. But he just so happened to have a Bailet in his possession. A Bailet will activate when its chosen one is in a high state of desire and despair, and it granted him an audience with the God Hand themselves. And from there, the Count decided that he would sacrifice his wife to be devoured by demons in exchange for greater power and an escape from the misery from which he felt. The Slug Count performs several important narrative purposes throughout the short time that he's in Berserk. For one thing, he shows that even after becoming an apostle, he continues to implement his countly duties. As in, this is showing that apostles still, for the most part, keep a low profile and don't constantly ravage and enslave places like the Snake Apostle was shown to do. Though he did keep captured heretics for himself for the purpose of eating them alive, and when his physician Vargas found out, he strung him up and ate Vargas's wife and children in front of him before mutilating Vargas himself. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. The Count also shows up several times in the Golden Age arc, which is a prequel/backstory to where Berserk technically begins. He attacked the Band of the Hawk early until he was thwarted off by the Skull Knight, and at the actual eclipse, he was shown to have been the one to kill Pippin! My boy Pippin! The Count's a freaking bastard. But the biggest narrative purpose he serves is to show that despite agreeing to sacrifice what seemingly makes them human for demonic power, some of that humanity is left over, as the Count still has a daughter named Theresia who he still cares for. And by care for, I mean keeps her locked away so that nothing can ever happen to her, but hey, he does get her a pet elf when he finds one. Yeah, so the idea here is that even after everything is stripped away and your worst self is brought to the surface, it's not an exact science. Depending on how strongly you felt about a person before apostlehood, those feelings could still linger post-transformation. We would see this again later with Rosine and how she felt about her friend Jill, and perhaps it's the biggest flaw in the apostle creation system. Some people even wonder if this means that Griffith, as Femto, also still has some care for Guts, and that seems more like a topic for another video. But a good argument against this may be that despite the Count not wanting anything bad to happen to his daughter, that he may have been using her more as a mask for how he felt about himself, not wanting to admit that he is a real monster. And if he protects her and keeps her safe, he can still lie to himself that he is a good father, despite about everything that he's done. The Count is also the first apostle and character that we see refuse a sacrifice and then be dragged to hell. After his entanglement with Guts, the Count is on the verge of death, being beaten and sliced till he's nothing but a severed head squirming around. His Bela activates once again, bringing him back to the God Hand. And they say that they can heal him, but first he must make yet another sacrifice. And the only person he has left was his daughter. And after his brutal truth was revealed to her and his shame was put on display, he chose not to perform that sacrifice. From here, we see the Vortex, Berserk's version of Hell, a swirling eternal mass of pain compiled of millions of souls. Souls conjured together that burst out of the Vortex, grabbing onto the Count himself, and assimilating him into that void. No pun intended. The Count's appearance in his human form is a large, bald man, seemingly overweight from his indulgence. Irony being that those indulging in sexuality are punished, but I guess gluttony is okay. And his apostle form is really something else. It looks like,
penis, the male reproductive organ, also known as tallywhacker, schlong, or
Wiener?
He does in fact look like a giant slug that can slither around quickly. He has several slimy tentacles that flail about and can grab onto whatever. He has his speaking head on top of a long neck that has another mouth under it, assumingly for better human consumption, and he seems to be able to grow and stretch various parts of his body, longer and shorter when necessary, and can actively choose what parts he wants to transform, like in this image. So obviously the sheer size of him increases his strength tenfold, and his durability is equally insane. He gave Guts a run for his money and had him beaten down several times. Along with that, just like a slug, he can regenerate pieces of him that are cut off, and they slither right back into place. The Count can also, and again is the first to be shown to do this, create pseudo-apostles. He takes a knight who was defeated by Guts named Zondark. Pfft, Zondark, a stupid character. Look at him. Stupid. And he spits a small-looking version of himself into Zondark's ear, effectively taking possession of Zondark and giving Zondark similar abilities like him being able to transform his body into a squirmy, slug-like appendage all over the place, and then also his regenerative capabilities. The Count can also communicate through Zondark this way and also obtain any information that the pseudo sees or encounters. It's unclear if the Count can only control/create one pseudo at a time. It would make sense because if you could have multiple ones, then why not just have a whole army of these guys around? Fighting the Count, as you would imagine, would be an extremely difficult task. His armor class would be off the charts, but his weakness does seem to be going for the head. If the small head of the slug inside the pseudo-apostle is destroyed or smashed, he is able to continue to control it. As well, when Guts cuts off his head from the giant main slug apostle body, though the Count remains alive, he seems unable to control the body any longer, being disconnected from it. So your best bet in a fight against him is to somehow sever the head from the body. Try holding your sword in your teeth, it seems to be super effective. But all in all, I get a pretty nostalgic feel for the Count when I think about him sometimes. Though my first exposure to Berserk was the anime films, beginning to read the manga was so exciting for the first time, and the Count being the first major antagonist really stands out, and not to mention how his mere existence puts so many pieces on the board that would continue to expand and develop throughout the course of the entire series of Berserk. You might even say that the lore that we get from the Count is the single most important piece of lore in all of Berserk. But anyways, guys, tell me what you think about the Count. Put all your comments down below about the big slug boy. Love to hear your thoughts about this character. Do you like him? Do you not like him? What do you feel about the Black Swordsman arc? Put all those thoughts down below. Don't forget to like the video. Also comment and subscribe, as it helps the video be seen in the algorithm. Check out the description as well for the Discord and Patreon links if those are your kind of thing. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you in the next video. When face to face with the God Hand, the Slug Count decided not to subscribe to the Real Life Ryan channel, which caused him to be pulled into the Vortex of Souls that has him suffer in pain, in agony, and anguish for all eternity. And all he had to do was subscribe to avoid this horrible fate, so maybe you won't make the same decision.